Thank you very much, Wolfgang. And I'm very happy to announce our next speaker on stage, who will be Katharine Jarmul from Thoughtworks, talking about setting your generative AI appetite, evaluating risks and opportunities. Katharine Jarmul is a principal data scientist at Thoughtworks Germany and author of the recent O'Reilly book, Practical Data Privacy. Previously, she has held numerous roles at large companies and startups in the US and Germany, implementing data processing and machine learning systems with a focus on reliability, testability, privacy, and security. Please welcome Katharine Jarmul.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here today. And what we're going to talk about is setting a generative AI risk appetite. So as announced, my focus is on data privacy and data security within machine learning. I've been working in that space, doing technical work for the past 6 years. And I'm here to maybe share some tidbits that I've learned during that time on how to create an appropriate risk appetite that allows you to experience the opportunities of generative AI, but also make sure that you do it safely, securely, and in a responsible way. Who here is already using generative AI either as a person or as a business? Okay, and who here has sat and thought about what are the actual risks and opportunities of using this? Aha, okay. Well, I'm very excited to hear some of your thoughts. If you'd like to come share them, we have a booth. We have a few books at the booth. But what we've seen is that generative AI use has taken off. So the amount of time that it took for ChatGPT to reach 1 million users was 5 days. That's a tremendously small amount of time in comparison with a large amount of other technical companies. And why is it that people want to use generative AI? I think there's a few different use cases that, particularly being somebody involved in the machine learning field for the past 15 years or so, I think there's a few use cases that are actually real. So I'm not here to tell you use cases that are not practical, use cases that will happen in 5 years. I'm here to tell you use cases that you could potentially use generative AI today in your business. First, obviously, the replacement of tedious data tasks. We heard a lot today about data retrieval, search mechanisms, all types of multimodal input where you have speech input or video input or photo input, and you want to do some sort of information retrieval in a text database you have or in other text sources that you have. This is a real thing that you can do today. You could do it with the multimodal models that exist. You could also decide to fine-tune or train your own, especially if you have proprietary data. We'll talk more about that later. But this is a real thing that you can do to help customers and also your internal workers at your business. Another thing, this is active use cases we're seeing in industry that Thoughtworks is actively working on, is giving users, giving your customers, if you're B2C, a fun, interactive way. I really see 2 types of customers that are going to use this. First off, it's maybe older customers that are accustomed to now using apps like Siri or other types of voice assistants to talk through things so they don't have to put their glasses on to look at their phone and so forth. So it'd be really nice to offer it for those users, a way to interact with your website, a way to interact with your customers in a way where they can speak the type of thing they're looking for, and then they can get spoken back to them the things that are found. Also, obviously, younger people want to use WhatsApp, right? Want to use different types of text mechanisms, and you can allow people to then have a text chatbot that understands kind of more of a language that they might speak. And this might not exactly be the same language model. You might need to think and work through how to reach different audiences. Finally, Stable Diffusion, which I'd like to remind everybody is from Germany. So the idea that California, I'm a Californian, but the idea that California is the only place where generative AI is coming from is not correct. Stable Diffusion, here built in Germany, and numerous other creative generative AI use cases are being shown across the world. And I think for the creative field, or if you have creative marketing people in your firm, this is something that you can use as inspiration. We'll talk a bit more about what that means for proprietary information or copyright information in a minute. And finally, empowering your employees with extra assistance. This is also some use cases that we're actively working on in industry right now as Thoughtworks. How do you allow users to search through complex, tedious documentation databases and to think through, okay, I need to quickly understand how to shape this amount of maintenance work that we're doing, and I need in the next few minutes to understand exactly how many engineers I have to assign to fix this piece of machinery. So maybe I've piqued your appetite. Maybe you've seen some of the opportunities or chances that are available today. What I'd also like to talk about is what are the risks? And this is the field that I specialize in. So AI risks and harms, there are many. What I've decided to do is I highlight the ones that I think are real risks today, and it's not interpretability, and it's not the AI Act. These are real harms that are active in systems, even I would say that are most likely compliant with those regulations. And it's a little bit more about your brand and reputational risk and less about potential regulatory risks. Of course, they both can go hand in hand. First and foremost, privacy and also the sensitivity of the data that you use is paramount. This is a field, again, that has become highly technical. So the types of opportunities or technologies that are available to address privacy risk have massively changed within the past 10 years. And if you're still using privacy the old way of thinking through, oh, we tokenized it, or oh, we masked some things, or oh, we told people that they couldn't use that data source, that is not actually the way that we would today recommend with more emerging technologies how to address privacy risk, especially in the field of machine learning. Privacy is a massive risk with generative AI systems. It has been proven that they can overfit and memorize particularly sparse parts of the data set. So, for example, there's active GDPR requests and lawsuits going on right now about the fact that personal data that is saved in OpenAI models cannot be edited, cannot be deleted, cannot be changed. I had a chance to participate in a EU-wide privacy conference with the EU data privacy authorities, and there's active research ongoing of how can we do one-time deletion of massive models, how can we train in such a way with things like differential privacy to allow us to mitigate some of these risks. But the risks, most likely in the way that we train massive multimodal models, will continue. From a security perspective, this is a field that I've been active in for 5 years. If anybody here knows Chaos Communication Congress, I gave a talk there many years ago about hacking AI systems, and this is still a real risk that happens. There's going to be no semblance of guardrails that makes an AI system 100% secure, but there's also no way to make a computer system 100% secure. I am not one of those people that says we have to wait until we have fully secure AI systems, and I actually embrace some of the new thinking around this, where it means that we actually have to build systems around the AI systems where we can actively monitor inputs and outputs and actively assess risks that way in kind of a more traditional security paradigm. Prejudice and bias will continue to exist in AI systems. For a long time, I worked in fairness and machine learning. I was active in the research community there. At this point in time, now 6 years later, do not believe it is possible for us to build an unbiased or unprejudiced model. That's not something we're going to technically feasibly do. The best thing that you can do is embrace the fact that there will be prejudice, there will be bias in your models, and decide for your own self what types of guardrails, what types of monitoring do you want to set, and also think to yourself, do we want to actually train a model from scratch so that we can control and anticipate the types of prejudice that we would see in the data itself? Because obviously, models that are trained on the internet are also trained on the toxicity of the internet, and this is not going to change in any foreseeable future. Finally, the AI supply chain is a real thing. So here in the EU, we have the Lieferkettengesetz. We have other ways of looking at the fairness of essentially our supply chain systems. What we don't yet have is the ability to inspect AI supply chains. And every week, every month, there's a new news story. In fact, the most recent one is that prisoners in jail in Finland are being used to label AI data. So I think we need to really think about what are the labor rights with our AI systems, where is our data coming from, that impacts prejudice and bias, that impacts the data quality of our system. It also impacts the ability for us to infer what types of risks or harm exists there. So let's move to slightly more practical, less theoretical. I want to give you some tools that I think might help you set your Gen AI or even also your more other types of machine learning use case risk appetite. First and foremost, we already have a method for this. We've been doing risk assessments for decades. We understand how to appropriately navigate risk from just a computing perspective, from an information security perspective. And I think that using these old school tools is still quite relevant and particularly useful when we think of emerging tech. First and foremost, when you go through a classic risk assessment, you want to actually sit around with a group of interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary experts at your organization, and you want to define what do you mean by risk. And it sounds simple, but it's actually not. If you were to sit down with somebody from legal, with somebody from privacy, with somebody from InfoSec, with somebody from data science or AI or data management, and maybe perhaps also somebody from product, you would probably have 5, 6, 7 different definitions of what is AI risk, what is machine learning risk, what is data privacy risk, what is information security risk. And so you really need to sit with this group of experts, and you need to properly define, maybe even on a use case by use case basis, but maybe on a quarterly basis or every half year, every year basis, and define when we talk about risk in using machine learning, what do we actually mean, and how do we define it? Once you do that, and only once you do that, can you actually identify it. And I would recommend at this point in time keeping identification of risks quite agile, in literally going through them right now on a case-by-case basis, and maybe starting to develop a system where this can be semi-automated, where this can even be used by the privacy team or by other teams at your organization to think through, okay, is this high-low risk? All right, go ahead or not. At that point in time, you're ready to evaluate risks. So you've identified the potential risks. Everybody in the room agrees on how they're defined. We can then speak logically about, is this actually a probability? Like, is this anywhere near high probability? Or is this more of a very, very low probability? And we have systems that we can already use to, let's say, monitor the system in production, monitor the system in types of internal network traffic, and therefore get the statistics we need to determine if it's working or not. So at that evaluation, you're going to make either a left turn or a right turn. You're either going to decide that you accept the risk, and then you can move on to documenting it, or you decide that you actually want to mitigate the risk. If you're thinking through mitigating the risk, you're going to have to already have defined well your risks, so from the very beginning. And hopefully, when you define those risks, you can also define a list of potential mitigations that you're actively involved in, that you're thinking through, that you're working on at your organization. And obviously, I have some strong opinions there. If you want to come drop by the booth, I'd be happy to talk about mitigating privacy risk and security risk in machine learning models. Finally, at the very end, the most important step is actually managing and communicating and what I would call owning the risk. Deciding, okay, who owns this risk? When something happens, who needs to be informed? And who and how do we communicate the risk, not only internally, but also to those that are going to be responsible for actually dealing with an incident when and if it happens? A few tidbits, a few thoughts from me on potentially mitigating AI risk. First and foremost, I'm obviously a huge proponent of building privacy and using tools like privacy engineering, which is an emerging field that has been around for the past 20 years, but is now rapidly changing with new research. Building that into your AI use cases and actively thinking, particularly if you're taking proprietary data, if you're taking sensitive data, if you're taking input from users. I don't ever want to hear a phone call that I made to my bank being played at a conference. That is just my personal opinion. But I should be given, as a user, the ability to opt in and out of these systems. And this is, by the way, nothing new in the AI Act. This is from GDPR. Second thing, you're going to want to decide if you want to train or fine-tune models. This is done in a variety of ways. You might need reinforcement learning experts. You might also need other types of machine learning experts. And this is something that you can actively work on today and experiment with. And it doesn't mean starting from scratch, and it doesn't mean emitting tons and tons of carbon. You can also do this in a more lightweight way, and this is something that we have experience with at Thoughtworks. The reason to do so is, number one, we know from the Google memo that the quality of data that you put in, even if the data size is very small, will significantly impact the usefulness of the model in specific use cases. There are also times when Gen AI is just not the right tool, and instead thinking through actually machine learning or building a multimodal system where you have multiple models that can work together, where a multimodal model might be one of them, and then other machine learning models are other parts of it. This is where thinking through these problems and actively adapting them to the use case can increase the reliability of your system and also the observability of the outputs. And then finally, you can give users the ability. So if you're going to put a chat interface in front of users and you're going to use an open AI model, I encourage you, I plead with you to please put an ability for users to flag harmful content. There is a potential that it will do that. If you put that, then you not only reduce your reputational risk, but you're also going to help feed information into your system of potential forms of abuse, either by users, but also by the model itself. When you think through also the rewards, so we can talk about the risks, we can mitigate the risks, but I want you to also think about actively assessing, is the model giving us the business value that we want and that we need and that we expected? And this means not only to evaluate and monitor risks, but to also actively think through, how are we benefiting from this? It doesn't make any sense for you to use a model, to put a bunch of money into it, to be paying a bunch of server costs and so forth, to host that model, and to not actually analyze, are we getting the value, or are our customers getting the value from this? So what I would first recommend doing is, if you're new to this field and you want to test out some ideas, you could potentially think through just a really low-tech, human AI-supported Gen AI use case. And what I mean by that is use humans armed with different types of generative AI and do a low-tech setup testing of if it improves the customer experience, if it improves internal knowledge or sharing, if it improves any type of business metric. Only when you've proved with your prototype, then you start to invest in generative AI, because it is expensive, because it is going to require upskilling, because it is going to require numerous amounts of resources. And therefore, you should really actually first test your hypotheses and ensure that you have something valuable. Second thing you can actively start doing, and this is in parallel, what internal sources do you have? This can be images, this can be videos, this can be audio, this can be text. What internal sources do you have that are valuable? What are valuable and also sensitive? So some of the amazing, I have to say that as a Californian, hearing some of the talk this morning from the minister was a little bit alarming, because I think there's actually really creative, imaginative things happening within Europe around thinking through AI systems and building more responsible data usage that we just don't have in America. We don't have things like federated learning taking off in America the same way that it is here. We don't have things like thinking through privacy engineering and building them into systems. And I think actually that some of the constraints that responsible AI gives us allows us to also create new ways of thinking about machine learning that are also more centered on human rights and responsibilities. And I think that that's a really cool thing, and kind of why I'm still here. So think through for your internal uses, whether they be sensitive, whether they be proprietary, whether they be confidential. These are all potential sources. And if you could build machine learning systems, and I know you can build machine learning systems responsibly, then you can use these data, and you could use these data in a compliant and in an ethical manner. Finally, you're going to do experimentation with domain-specific NLP and machine learning. So what I want you to think through is your domain is special. You are not a generic domain. And in your special domain, whatever it might be, you're going to end up being able to better fit machine learning to your use cases if you empower your data teams, if you empower other technical teams, and also empower your product teams to think through and experiment with different ways that you can use machine learning even outside of generative AI. And this is nothing new. This is continuous integration, continuous design, continuous delivery. That's part of what Thoughtworks is known for. And one of the things that I've seen work really well in these systems is creating an iterative and agile way to think through machine learning in production systems, to think through AI use cases, to think through delivering product value to your customers. This is a way that we allow feedback, we allow input, and we also do continuous risk assessment as we go through that, because then the risks are very known from feedback in a very short amount of time. My book is called Practical Data Privacy. It will be offered in German in February of next year. Pre-order will be later this year from O'Reilly.de. But you can come look at a copy in English today at our booth. We also have copies of the Data Mesh book at our booth. By the way, we were inventors of Data Mesh, and so please come drop by the Thoughtworks booth. It's right near the entrance. Come say hi to us. I will happily talk through questions. And my colleague, Dr. Sebastian Werner, who's an expert in machine learning operations, he will be also talking later on a panel today. Thank you very much for your attention and time.